2.5 million documents locked away inside the Justice Department right now. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's not a rumor. That is the official number, confirmed by the United States government, the Epstein Files. You thought they were released. You were told they were released. They weren't. And here's the question nobody in Washington wants to answer. What exactly is worth hiding from the American people? Congress passed a law, a transparency law, signed, sealed, delivered, forcing the Justice Department to open Jeffrey Epstein's investigative files to the public. And yes, documents came out, millions of pages. But here's what they didn't tell you. The majority of what was released? Blacked out, heavily redacted. Words, names, connections, gone, invisible. And the other 2.5 million documents? Still sitting in a DOJ building, untouched, unreleased. This is where the story really begins. Let's get everyone up to speed. Jeffrey Epstein, convicted sex offender, ran one of the most disturbing and well-connected trafficking networks in modern American history. He died in federal prison in 2019 under circumstances that still raise serious questions. The people around him? Billionaires, politicians, royalty, global elites who believed, who acted like the law simply did not apply to them. Last year, Congress did something genuinely rare. Republicans and Democrats together pushed through the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The bipartisan pair behind it, Reps. Thomas Massie of Kentucky and Reps. Ro Khanna of California. The goal was simple. Let the American people see what their government knows. Over 3.5 million pages were released. That sounds enormous. Until you realize it's only part of the picture. Here's what Washington isn't saying. That 3.5 million pages? Riddled with redactions, names of alleged co-conspirators, blacked out, interview memos from the FBI, withheld, documents written in foreign languages, never even uploaded, and the 2.5 million files still locked inside the Justice Department. The DOJ's official position is simple. We're done here. Move on. A senior DOJ official recently told reporters, on the record, that the department is hoping to move on from the Epstein investigation. No new charges expected, no new disclosures planned. Move on. To the American public that funded this investigation, elected these officials, and is owed this transparency, the message from their own Justice Department is, trust us, we've shown you enough. That's the shift. This was never just about releasing documents. This is about whether the most powerful legal institution in America operates above the law it is supposed to enforce. And this is where it gets serious. The law Massie and Khanna passed, as significant as it was, had a fatal flaw. No enforcement mechanism, no teeth, no way to drag the Justice Department into court if they decided not to comply. Bradley Moss, a national security lawyer with decades of experience litigating government transparency, called it bluntly, one of the biggest self-owns by Congress in my lifetime. His words, not mine. He said the statute was, in effect, a please do the right thing law. And the DOJ? They read that law. They understood exactly what it lacked. So when Congress pushed, they pushed back. When lawmakers tried to take DOJ to federal court in New York, the department's argument was surgical. With no standing and no cause of action, the representatives are unable to seek the relief they request. The court largely agreed. Congress wrote a law to expose the truth, and then, unintentionally, wrote a loophole big enough for the entire Justice Department to walk right through. But here's where this story takes a turn that most people are missing entirely. Attorney General Pam Bondi, the top law enforcement officer in the United States, was subpoenaed by Congress, under oath, to explain exactly how her department has handled the Epstein files and what happened when she showed up. Democrats walked out of the room, not metaphorically. They physically stormed out of a closed-door briefing on Capitol Hill, saying Bondi refused to commit to complying with her own subpoena. Think about that for a moment. The Attorney General of the United States, subpoenaed by a bipartisan committee, and the meeting ends with members of Congress walking out in frustration. When was the last time you saw that happen? Here's what this moment actually reveals about power in Washington right now. The DOJ knows what Congress is missing: leverage. Even House Oversight Chair James Comer, a Republican, said personally he didn't see a reason for Bondi to appear for a deposition. He's only moving forward because 5 Republicans on his own committee demanded it. The bipartisan pressure that got this law passed in the first place, it's fraying. And the Justice Department knows it. But here's what the DOJ didn't anticipate. Survivors of Epstein's abuse are now exploring legal action themselves. Massey and Khanna have signaled they may join those survivors in suing, in their personal capacities, to access more files. Judge Paul Engelmeyer, overseeing the Maxwell criminal case, ruled that while he couldn't supervise DOJ compliance, the lawmakers and survivors are at liberty to pursue this through other legal channels. That door, small as it is, remains open. So why is this happening? Why is the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world so resistant to releasing files on a man who is already dead? Let's be honest about what we're really talking about. Epstein didn't operate alone. The files contain names, real names, of people who are very much still alive, still wealthy, still influential, still connected to governments, financial institutions, and power structures around the world. The DOJ has confirmed it withheld identities of alleged co-conspirators. It withheld FBI interview memos, including 3 memos involving a woman who alleged abuse involving President Donald Trump between the ages of 13 and 15. Trump has consistently denied wrongdoing. The memos were eventually released after lawmakers flagged the improper redaction. But the question isn't about any single name. The question is systemic. When a government agency withholds the identities of co-conspirators in a child trafficking investigation, not because of national security, but because of internal deliberations, attorney-client privilege, and bureaucratic process, something has gone deeply wrong. As Khanna put it, there has never been a law in modern American history that has exposed more of the global elite. It's been a window into the Epstein class, rich and powerful people who acted as though they were above the law. Half a window, with the other half still locked shut. Let's ground this in the numbers. Over 3.5 million pages released, but a majority remain heavily redacted. 2.5 million additional documents still withheld entirely inside DOJ. The House Oversight Committee issued its first Epstein subpoena to DOJ in August 2025. But the most substantial documents only started flowing after Massey and Khanna's law passed in November 2025. And as of today, there is still no legal mechanism for any court to force the removal of a single redaction. Numbers don't lie. The system so far is holding. Now, to be fair, the DOJ does have a defense. Officials argue that attorneys worked grueling hours, reviewing over 1,000 documents a week under impossible deadlines. Mistakes were made. And when they were caught, donned improper redactions, victims' names accidentally exposed, the department corrected them. There is always a ton of mistakes in document reviews, one senior official said. That's a real point. Government document reviews at this scale are genuinely complex. Not every redaction is a cover-up. Not every withheld file contains explosive secrets. But here's why that defense falls short. The issue isn't isolated mistakes. It's the pattern, withholding co-conspirator identities, blocking interview memos, refusing to commit to compliance under oath, asking Congress and the public to simply trust a process they cannot verify. In a case involving the sexual abuse of children and the corruption of global power structures, trust us is not an acceptable standard. Not in America, not in a democracy, not ever. 0. So where does this go from here? Congress is now drafting new legislation, this time with enforcement teeth. Massey and Khanna both say they would add explicit legal mechanisms for compliance if a new bill moves forward. Survivors are preparing to sue, and their standing, as direct victims, is far stronger than any lawmakers. The Bondi subpoena is still live. The deposition fight isn't over. And the political pressure? Public outrage is, as Massey himself said, the most effective tool they currently have. Here's the open question that nobody can answer yet. If new legislation passes, if enforcement mechanisms are finally added, what exactly will those 2.5 million hidden documents reveal? And more importantly, who in power is most afraid of the answer? This isn't just about Jeffrey Epstein anymore. It never really was. This is about the oldest question in American democracy. Does the law apply equally to everyone, or does power always find a way to protect itself? Right now in 2026, the answer is still being written. And the people writing it aren't just in Congress. They're in courtrooms. They're survivors who refuse to disappear. They're bipartisan lawmakers who, for once, both found something worth agreeing on. The files are still locked, but the door is cracking. The question is whether enough Americans care to keep pushing it open, because if they don't, someone, somewhere, is counting on exactly that. If you want the kind of analysis that cuts through the noise, no partisan spin, no cheap outrage, just cold, clear-eyed breakdowns of what's actually happening in Washington and why it matters to you, subscribe to Washington Today. Because the stories that shape America rarely look like the headlines. And the ones that matter most? They're usually the ones someone doesn't want you to see.